The San Francisco 49ers offseason in 60 seconds. Brought back Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator, promoted Clay Kubiak to the offensive coordinator, extended Brock Purdy 5 years, $265 million, $180 million guaranteed. That's a lot of Toyotas. George Kittle, 4 years, $76 million, $35 guaranteed. Fred Warner, 3 years, $63 million, $56 guaranteed, traded for Bryce Huff, Brian Robinson, and Sky Moore. Deals for MVS, I think that happened today. Luke Farrell, Mac Jones, Demarcus Robinson, and Kyle Juszczyk. In the draft, edge Michael Williams, 11th overall, defensive tackle Alfred Collins, 2nd overall, linebacker Nick Martin, 3rd round, 75th overall, cornerback Upton Stout, 3rd round, 100th overall, CJ West, defensive tackle in the 4th round. Lost Deebo Samuel, Aaron Banks, Charvarius Ward, Javon Hargrave, Jalen Moore, Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, Jordan Mason, Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins. Derek, what are you excited to watch with the 2025 San Francisco 49ers?
I mean, I think for as long as Kyle Shanahan has been there, the answer has always been some version of like, what's Kyle Shanahan going to do? And my version of that now is like, how can we marry what we were in like 2022 and 2023 when we really had like the best versions of CMC? We could get into more gun. We could check the ball down to him. We could put him out in the slot and like do all these option routes. They could be a little bit more of a dink and dunk, like drop back passing offense than they ever were with like Jimmy Garoppolo. How can we marry that with what we got out of some development from Brock Purdy last year, where he was like, I don't need to do the check down, just kind of throw 5-6 yards at a time. Like I can really unleash it as a drop back passer, throw into more of these tight windows, 20 yards down the field, really push the ball on like these 15-yard outs and stuff. How do we marry those two worlds? And what does the quality of that look like? Last year, for all of what they were still like the 9th best offense in the NFL. If marrying that a little bit and getting healthy CMC means they can be a top 3-4 unit again, I'm really, really excited to see how that might come together.
I'm curious what like the coverage menu looks like against this team compared to what it looked like last year without McCaffrey, because they had a lot more split safety that they went against last year, and they played against a ton more man coverage than they played against last year. I don't think that's all CMC, but I do think that's some CMC. So how we end up shaking out between the two poles of them getting more cover 3 and more single high and more base defense than almost any team in the league in 2023, to them actually seeing cover 3 at a below average rate in 2024. How does Christian McCaffrey change that math for this team, and what sort of advantages that create for Brock Purdy? I am very curious to see what that ultimately looks like. Dave, you had a similar answer to this. I think that you also just want to see what this offense looks like with McCaffrey back and, hopefully with just a little bit better health across the board.
It's funny. Mine is so much. I'm so macro. Like y'all just went so granular, and I'm so intrigued by the macro with the San Francisco 49ers because I love a team that's at a crossroads. And that's where I feel like this team is. Like it's not right to say that it's a new era of 49ers football, but I think we're watching like a software patch right now. Like you go to bed and wake up with a new cell phone. That's kind of what I feel like the 49ers are right now. You don't need to relist all the players they lost, Robert, but a significant amount of the guys that we associated with the Niners over the last 3 or 4 years departed in one off season. And now you're starting down a road with an expensive quarterback. That was always the thing with the Niners. We have the Avengers because we're not paying our quarterback anything. And they got away with it for a long time. Not that Purdy's crippling their cap right now, but it's a different build and a different type of way to build your team. They're in transition, and yet they are also still very, very talented. Like, I think this is still an incredibly good roster, even if they're not used to having this many question marks. Like it feels like the Niners, like you look around the league and everybody's like, yeah, welcome to life in the actual NFL. You don't actually get to have a bad asset at 19 positions. That's not how it works. And I feel like the Niners are about to be coping with that. And it's fun to see how they're going to do. I think it's very interesting.
Derek brought this up earlier today, and I think that's actually the right comparison. It kind of feels like where the Bengals were last year. And I do think that this team is willing to spend much more money than the Bengals are, and over the next couple years they will. But we had to pay the quarterback. We've had to pay everybody on the offense, essentially. We have a highly paid left tackle. We have a highly paid tight end. We have a highly paid running back. And now we have one piece that's really expensive on defense, but we're going with a cheap youth movement otherwise because of how much money we've had to spend on the offense. That is kind of what this feels like. I think the results could be better than what they were for the Bengals last year. But when you look at the actual structures of the roster, there are actually some similarities here.
There really are a lot of similarities, and like the only difference is the Niners have 2 defenders that I really feel confident about, whereas the Bengals only really had 1. But like it's a lot of the same build.
Maybe 3, right? Like Lenore, Warner,
Lenore is solid. I just like
Bosa.
Lenore's good.
yeah. I was thinking like Warner and Bosa are just like sight unseen. That guy's going to be insanely
Yes,
good.
yes.
Yeah.
But I did maybe there's like 1 or 2 more proven commodities on this Niners defense, but I think broadly it actually is a pretty good comparison to make.
Mhm.
Let's talk about these swing points for the 2025 Niners. What do you got for me, David?
I don't know if you guys have noticed, the Niners have been dramatic once again during training camp. Like that just seems to be a theme for
This time
the
it's not their
organization.
fault, at least.
It's not as much their fault. I mean, they are in a standoff with Juwan Jennings, so like there's still some shenanigans going on, but I'm curious to see how much better the 49ers can be as the season goes along, because it does seem like they're going to get some reinforcements. Brandon Ayuk obviously being the biggest one among them. Malik Mustafa should be coming back from an injury at some point during the season. Demarcus Robinson is going to be suspended for the first 3 weeks of the season. So there are guys that will make their way back to the Niners roster. Mustafa and Ayuk are the ones that I have circled particularly. I'm curious to see how good those guys can be. I mean, it's dangerous to count on guys coming off of injury, dropping into the lineup and being what you remember, but how much better do you feel about this team with a close to 100% Brandon Ayuk joining the roster in late October, early November? I mean, these are the types of things that could really spur a second half run. So if I'm a Niners fan looking for optimism, it's that maybe this team is a lot better in the second half of the season than it looks right here at roster cuts.
And that's probably for 2 reasons, right? Like all the injury stuff, obviously, but then we'll talk about the young defense a little bit more. But like we probably, if things go right, would expect the younger defense to be better in the second half than the first half. So if you have that on top of all these guys who are coming back, it's like, okay, we might think the Niners, we might do like a it's so over, we're so back with the Niners by like week 5, and then by the time we get to week 12, we're like, they're back, maybe they're gonna go to the NFC Championship again. So that's definitely something I'd be keeping an eye on.
We're going to talk about the first month of the year on offense a little bit later in the show, but my swing point here is what the early season and just the season overall looks like for the young defense and the young defensive front specifically. If you look at the Niners 2 deep right now, and I think that there's 6 guys that are on their 2 deep that are rookie players at this point. And I think at least 5, probably 6, if you throw Nick Martin in there as their third linebacker, are going to get significant run on this team. They play nickel like 90% of the time. So maybe Martin doesn't play without any sort of injury. But CJ West, Alfred Collins, Mykel Williams, Marquise Siegel is slated to be the starter for them at free safety, jumping Jair Brown, who's been there for the last couple of years. We talked about that with Matt Barrows a couple weeks ago when we did the training camp notebook. I was shocked to hear that. And Upton Stout is probably going to be the starting nickel on this team. So we're talking about 5 guys who are going to be important pieces of this defense that are rookies, including 3 in like their 6 or 7 man defensive line rotation. That's enough of a swing point for me. Like that's enough unproven talent to kind of think this is where this year is going to pivot for the Niners, Derek. Like I believe in just the DNA of this defense and what it's been under Robert Saleh over the last few years, but he's going to have to work a little bit of magic with this group to get them back to feeling like a Niners defense that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, like they need at least half of them to be like useful players. Like I think Martin we'll see again because he's not even in the starting lineup, but like one of these DBs needs to be some degree of a difference maker. Mykel Williams, I have a lot of faith in what he is as a player, so I hope that works out. I'm really looking at the 2 defensive tackles. To me, I think if Alfred Collins can be the player that they want him to be, that's the one that makes the difference to me, because like CJ West is a little bit more of a small kind of penetrating player, and I think that's already the kind of other defensive tackles that they have, whereas Collins to me at his best is a little bit more of a just sit there, be a space eater. And so if that works out for them, if that's the player that hits, I think it can start to make this whole thing work together. But again, we'll see.
What is keeping you up at night, Derek, about the San Francisco 49ers in 2025?
Speaking of that defense, The best players are awesome. Like Nick Bosa's incredible, Fred Warner's incredible. I think we like, guys like Lenore. The weak points in the defense might kill them. Again, if some of these rookies don't work out, like if neither of the two defensive tackles hit, then you have this room of defensive tackles who are like Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis to me are like, if they're your third defensive tackle coming off the bench to be a little bit of like penetrating force, that's good. That's not what they are. They're your starters. And so that to me is a little bit of an issue. Jason Pinnock starting at safety in the meantime while Mustafa is not out there, I think is a little bit of a concern to me. And then like, I know they seem to have some degree of faith in Upton Stout, but we just don't know. Like he's a rookie. Like we just don't know. Same thing with Siegel. So there's just a chance that even though they have these two all pro level players in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, they might also have 2 or 3 spots that are like, oh my God, this is a huge, huge issue. And I'm just a little bit worried that we're going to get there.
It's totally reasonable. I don't even know what to say to that. It's just like I have no cope whatsoever. Like there's a chance that there are just 2 or 3 like nightmarish spots on this defense.
I hadn't thought about this until just now, but how do you think Bosa and Warner cope with the potential pitfalls of that after several years of this just well-oiled machine full of, by the time they got to that Super Bowl a couple years ago, those guys can like read each other's minds. And that feels like it could be a huge adjustment for guys of that caliber playing with guys who are figuring out how to play in the NFL.
It might, but I think Warner is just like a madman. Like I think almost regardless of who or what you put around him, he is going to be on 110 all of the time. And so he might get frustrated and maybe he'll
to be clear, I'm not worried about Fred Warner, like what he's doing. I'm worried about Fred Warner being perpetually furious at a bunch of rookies.
That might just make him play even faster. So I'm okay with that if that's where we arrive.
Let's go to the other side of the ball with what's keeping me up. The offensive line and just this idea that the pass protection isn't going to be good enough when they get to January. That's always keeping me up with this team based on the way that they treat this position group. I'm even a little bit more worried about it now than I have been over the last couple years because there's been attrition talent-wise among this group. And I don't think Aaron Banks is a perfect player by any stretch, but the fact that they moved on from Aaron Banks and it's kind of like, all right, Ben Barch, you're up now. Like that is how this team approaches these positions. And you're the best lineman that you have outside of Trent Williams, who is now creeping closer and closer to 40 every year. And I worry about him staying healthy, is Donovan McPooney, who's coming into this season hurt after looking really good last year as a rookie. So I think the baseline for this offensive line is concerning, let alone if they get dinged up a little bit. And this group and what they've always said about it is, we would rather have pass catchers and weapons we can scheme around the offensive line. That is often true for 17, even 18, sometimes 19 games a year. And then they get into the playoffs and a defensive coordinator like Spags is able to pick on this team in pass protection because of the way that they're constructed. And the Niners finished 31st in the NFL last year per next gen in the percentage of unblocked pressures that they allowed. Like teams have been able to get after them in this way. And the Texans were 32nd. And the Texans, again, have very similar pass protection rules based on the history with Bobby Slowick that the Niners do. And so the fact that now we're combining a world where teams are able to manipulate this team a little bit in protection and you don't feel good about the individual talent of those guys, especially if you're going to be living in more of a drop back world moving forward, considering some of the evolution we've seen from this team. It just makes me a little bit uneasy, Derek, that the players they have up front aren't going to be good enough in the biggest games of the year. Like, I think they might be good enough for this team to win 11 games in the NFC West, but if your aspirations are bigger than that, I think that's where I start to get a little bit concerned.
Yeah, I think Kyle Shanahan can put it together with just about anybody for, 17 weeks. It's a matter of like when you get to the playoff. Like we've even seen, in theory, better offensive lines get dismantled in that way. Like what Houston did to the Chargers, who had 2 like awesome young tackles. This San Francisco line is a lot worse than that. And so I think that's what you always have to be worried about. And like, I think for probably the past 3 years, this has been an offensive line where it's like, I would like to see a little bit more, but you have Kyle Shanahan and the skill players are all good enough that maybe it's not going to matter. I think with some of the skill players being banged up and leaving and it being a different unit, and Trent Williams is 37 years old and coming off of an injury. And then to me, 3 of the other 5 starters are below average players. Like I think Dominic Pooney is like a nice player for them, but the other guys to me just don't really move the needle. And so if Trent Williams takes 10%, 15% of a step back, which I think he already did a little bit last year, even when he was healthy, you just start to get into like pretty dangerous territory for what this thing might look like when you really need it.
Let's talk about what we're watching the first month of the season, Dave, with the San Francisco 49ers. We alluded to this a little bit earlier.
I was going to say, we talked about guys coming back from injury, and that's mainly the high-level guys, but all the way down, Kyle Shanahan's got his work cut out from him from the sounds of it. Like, it sounds like he's going to be doing quite a juggling act in the first 4 weeks of the season just because they don't have the bodies, guys. Ayuk and Robinson are unavailable. We'll see what happens with Juwan Jennings. There was a report over the weekend that if this contract situation and his calf injury doesn't get resolved, they could still send him to IR. I don't know if that's going to happen, but like, we don't know what's up with Juwan Jennings. Jacob Cowing is down with a hamstring injury. The rookie, Jordan Watkins, has a high ankle sprain. And the Niners cut Robbie Chosen and Russell Gage. I would guess one of those guys makes their way back to the roster eventually. But Ricky Pearsall is it as far as like receivers that get you excited for the first at least 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Now, I'm not particularly worried about it because you still have CMC. They just traded for Brian Robinson Jr., George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. They signed Luke Farrell in the offseason, so you probably do a little more 12 personnel than what we're used to from the 49ers. Like, there's ways you can work around this, and Kyle Shanahan is a good enough coach to do it, but I just think the Niners offense might look pretty goofy for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
And I think
MBS is here now, but like, how much does that matter? Like, I'm saying they literally just
did
need
that happen
bodies.
did that happen while we've been recording? Like,
It was. I think
happened
it was
like right
morning.
before. Yeah.
okay, all right.
So
They just need bodies. Like that's where we're at right now with the Niners receiving core.
And that's kind of why like the Ricky Pearsall thing and then the rest of the receivers to me are like two separate issues. Like at this point, you're right. Like for as much as I joke about the MVS thing, they do just need bodies, like anybody who can play for them. And so it kind of makes sense from that front. And also they kind of just need guys who can stretch the field so Pearsall doesn't have to do just that. But then I think there's also like the Ricky Pearsall question. And that's really what I'm watching is like, is he a guy who can go from, I think we all liked what he could be at the end of last year. But the matter is like, okay, is he a B-? Like, this is a fun wide receiver too? Or is this like a guy that we can actually feed and get him like 1,100 yards? Like, can he be Calvin Ridley, which like is not like the sexiest receiver in the league, but that's a guy who pretty consistently gets 1,000 yards. Can he be like that caliber of player over the course of like 17 games? Obviously.
Stylistically, he's very, very different than a player.
Yeah, he's
like
different.
That,
I just mean like that tier of receiver where it's like ideally, do you want to feed him that much? I don't know, but he can get you 1,100 yards if you need him to.
I just think that Juwan Jennings is so quietly important to all of this because having Juwan Jennings just makes Ricky Pearsall make so much more sense in a world where you're just biding your time until Brandon Ayuk comes back.
I don't think it's quiet. Yeah, I like if this Juwan Jennings thing lingers, I think that's a huge deal. And as much as I love Ayuk and I hope he's awesome when he gets back, certainly not counting on that the way the last year and a half have gone over like with all of that. So yeah, I don't know what they got to do. If they don't want to pay Juwan Jennings, they got to figure out another way to get him back to the roster. That feels very, very important.
Hear me out. Third downs, 22 personnel. Juszczyk is in the backfield, and we have McCaffrey out playing receiver.
Wait, Robert.
You know what? Sure. Why not?
we didn't even talk about this before the show, but in my notes I have they ran 50 snaps of 22 last year. So like it ain't uncharted territory for them. Like, let's get weird. Let's run some 22 personnel.
That's what we need from Christian McCaffrey. We need 100% of the snaps from him after dealing with the injury all of last season.
Mm-hmm.
What is success, Dave, for the 2025 San Francisco 49ers?
I love this. And it goes back to what I said. Like, the signs are there that tell you the San Francisco 49ers are in a little bit of a reset. Like, that's what the expenditures and the roster moves would have you believe. But guys, there's 6 first-team All-Pros expected to start for them week 1. Still, after all of this, they have that much talent. And that's without mentioning the $260 million quarterback. And that's without mentioning the head coach who has spent most of the last decade being lauded as the best in the NFL, or at least one of them, rightly so, in my opinion. I love Kyle Shanahan, but it feels disingenuous to just be like, oh, poor 49ers. They're not a Super Bowl team anymore. What could we possibly expect from them? No, there's plenty of stuff here working for San Francisco, assuming relative good health. And so, despite the fact that they're in a little bit of a step back, I think, I still have pretty high expectations for them. They don't play a hard schedule. I've talked about that over the course of the summer. It's remarkably easy because they finished 4th last year. This team should be able to make the playoffs and make noise once they get there. Like, we've seen them do that before, by the way. I think the last few years make everybody think of the Niners as this like inescapable juggernaut. We've seen San Francisco make the playoffs as a wild card and get to the NFC title game. Like, this is a very good, very experienced team, even still. And so at the very least, I want to see them in the divisional round, or I can't call this season a success. Not with this much talent. And by the way, a lot of that talent is closer to the end of their career than the beginning. Like, we don't have a lot of time here. We need to be successful.
Yeah, for me, it's I will give any coach and pretty much any team 1 year where you like at a given time, like 1 year where this just things don't go your way. You only win 7, 8 games, whatever, 6 games. You don't make the playoffs. That's all fine. We've seen it from Kyle Shanahan before. You don't really get 2. Like once you get 2, that's where it's like, even for as good as a coach as I think you might be, that's where I'm going to probably start to question some things. So they have to make it back somehow. If that only means 10 wins and you get the 7th seed, that's fine. That's at least some proof of concept that the offense is great again and the defense gets back to somewhere. But you got to get back in one way or another.
That's kind of where I am as well. I think that they need to make the playoffs based on just the talent this team has on the roster. I think the heights of that success in the playoffs, I'm still a little bit worried about what this defense is going to be at the biggest moments of the season. So them just like winning double-digit games and making the playoffs because of the questions that I have about the defense, that's enough for me to consider this a success for the Niners. Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.